Another couple of folks join us from downstairs if they get finished up with appointments or whatever they're working on. So, go ahead.
Dave Tholen, Purdue graduate, 1965. Roy Coolman, my business partner, I started in practice in 1967. Sold out MBA in 1997, after 40 years. 30 years, then worked in 2007, so and just have been thrilled to watch the practice grow.
And I'll say Dr. Thoma has always been an innovator and a forward thinker when it comes to technology, and so I even probably 10 years ago was talking about should we be looking at an oxygen generator for this hospital or for the future. So not all of his ideas were spot on, but most of them were very I'll let him.
He said that very...
Well, it was a very diplomatic way of saying, this guy ain't a saint.
Well, he's smart. He started with a positive and ended with kind of a, you know what I'm saying.
Yes, I'm Brad Coleman, inheritor of this great practice, and been here 20 years now this summer.
Trey Neal, the NBA guy.
NBA guy. He's one you really got to sell it to.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm not concerned about that.
I'm Molly Zarcy, I'm lead ICU technician. I manage the big oxygen tank downstairs as well. So.
Okay, very good.
And Fred had a couple of specific questions just even about how many doers we go through and how many times a week, and so you can probably help answer that one better than I. I just get mad when we run out.
Which you'll never run out again,
Yeah,
okay?
that's good to know.
So I'm Judy Wagaman, and to follow Trey, I'm the NBA gal. Operations support manager for the Central Division, partnering with Trey and with Nate. And this is my first visit to Knives. I've heard so many wonderful things about it. I've been with NBA for 7 years, but new to this role just in March. So I was on the GP side earlier. You know Lisa very well and have always wanted to come and visit everyone, so glad to be here. Thank you.
Good morning, I'm Nate Moot, MBA guy number 2, I guess. I lead the field operations team for specialty and ER, and also my first trip to Knives, and really happy to meet the team, and looking forward to a great day.
I'm Lisa Kissling, and I'm the lead surgery technician. I think we're kind of responsible sometimes for ordering oxygen if we're getting low or we're running out, although we have it on a scheduled delivery of this one 3 times a week. So yeah.
I'm Stacy Deger, third shift supervisor.
Keeps it running at night.
I'm Kim Brooks, administrative coordinator. I overlook those bills that come in from WSI that are going out. Yeah, there's lots of bills. So,
I'm Mary Baker, hospital administrator. I'm manager here at the hospital. Heard a lot about you, Fred.
Well, I don't know if that's good or bad.
No, definitely got Fred on board early. So.
I'm Amy. I'm admin support, and I just work in office and work on projects here and there.
Well, great. There'll be a test afterwards for all the names, and I'll most likely get maybe half of them right. You know, being in sales, you're supposed to know all that, but very nice to meet everyone. Sorry to interrupt, is there any way I can get like a little podium?
Yeah,
I see
you can
you
do
right
that
there.
or something.
Only because I have some bullet points.
Sure.
And as I'm growing older, my eyes keep getting worse.
No worries.
So, well, very nice to meet everyone. Appreciate the opportunity, Dr. Kuhlman. We met down at the Western Veterinary Show in Vegas. And yes, he was on the show floor quite a bit, everyone, okay? He was working. But I appreciate the opportunity for allowing me to come down here and speak to you about, which I'm very, very passionate about. Very, very, as you can tell, I'm a very, very upbeat person. And that goes over to the company that I work for. I'm very, very, very excited with this company. So I appreciate the opportunity for allowing me to come in. The drive was very nice coming down. It could have been a lot worse with the snow, but no problems at all. And yes, I am driving back tonight. So no, it's only about 6 hours, so it's not that bad. But my name's Fred Morgan. I'm sales and business development manager for a company named PCI Gases. That's Pacific Consolidated Industries. We are a leading manufacturer worldwide of medical and industrial oxygen generators or concentrators. They're both used interchangeably. Concentrator is a term on the medical side, which for you folks are home health care, COPD, emphysema, and generator is more of a term for the industrial market, steel making, welding, brazing, fish farming, et cetera, et cetera. So if you hear those names, and I may say them interchangeably, they ultimately do the same thing. Our company has been around since 1984. We are a manufacturer, which is very, very important. And that's something when I do shows, I look around and literally we're the only ones there from a manufacturing standpoint, which says a little bit, which should put you at ease that you're speaking with me this morning, early afternoon. PCI, we do both medical and industrial. On the medical side, we do breathable medical, where it's not only veterinary medical, but we do human medical also. Our equipment produces 93%, plus or minus 3, but typically our systems do about 93 to 95% medical grade oxygen, 24/7, which meets USP regulations, United States Pharmacopoeia specs. So with this market, I've never had any issues at all. On the human side, which we do quite a bit of business in Canada, because 93% is legal, Europe, quite a few other, now in Mexico, they just verified and a new pharmacopoeia down there for 93%. We sell our equipment for human hospital facilities. I also market for disaster preparedness, which is another market here that I can legally sell to. But going back to the company, been around since 1984, the company, located in Riverside, California, which is about 2 hours east of the LA area. The division I'm with is called the Commercial Oxygen Division, which is a spin-off of their main division. Back in '84, how this company got started, they started off with the military. We still have significant military contracts, especially with the Air Force, where we supply. We have nitrogen generators also, which they require for other needs like tires and their aircraft. But for aviator oxygen, the military approves 93% medical grade. I won't get involved on why on the medical human side, the FDA, and there are reasons, only approves 99%, but that's another topic of conversation. If you have any further questions, let me know. But we started off with the military in '84, and we still work with them today. The technology was spun off to the Commercial Oxygen Division, which I'm part of. I've only been with this company a little bit over a year. You may say, Fred, where have you been? I have been in this industry now for 30 years. I have significant sales and marketing experience with manufacturers of what we call air separation units. I've spent most of my career director of marketing with a large manufacturer on the PSA side, which we'll talk about. That is pressure swing absorption. We are VSA, vacuum swing absorption. Ultimately, it does the same thing. And I also spent the past 17 years with a company I just left last March as their national sales manager on the PSA side, doing a lot of vet shows, selling a lot of equipment. But as I said to Dr. Kuhlman, to keep it very professionally, it was time to leave. When you go from 58 employees down to 23 and you start losing a lot of your customers and can't get product out the door, it's time to move on. So I've had a very good name in the industry. I don't know everything, so if there's questions that you throw at me today that I'm not 100% sure of, I'm not going to give you a half answer. I'll get those answers for you. Work through Dr. Kuhlman, or if I get your email address directly, we'll notify you that way, but we'll get you the answers. But I have the company that I'm with right now, that's why I chose them. I could have went to a couple other places. There aren't a lot of manufacturers of what are called oxygen concentrators or generators in the marketplace. The company I'm with, I chose because of their commitment to quality, dependability, overall. I can sell anybody a piece of equipment, but it comes down to after-sales support. These things are electromechanical, which we'll talk about. Sometimes things happen. A lot of times they don't. But when you get on the phone, whether it's anybody here, and you have a question for our company, I'm telling you, I'm just not saying this, I wouldn't be with this company if I wasn't 100% sure that if I made a sale, that my or our customers would be taken care of. And to me, that is one thing that I can instill upon you moving forward and hopefully working with you and other facilities in the group here that you're going to be taken care of. We do have, which we won't touch upon too much, 24/7 service if need be. There's always someone on call, like maybe folks here. So it's a very, very good company with very, very high quality equipment in the marketplace. So that's a little bit about PCI. We just don't sell to veterinarians, and we touched upon the human side. We have three, what I say, divisions within the commercial option where we sell to, and about 60 vertical markets, which I'm responsible for. Just a quick touch upon that. Breathable medical, veterinary, human medical, where it's legal. Canada, I do quite a bit of business because it's legal up there, 93%. Big industry, which is coming into vets too, is HBOT, hyperbaric oxygen therapy. I've spoken to a lot of people. I have a couple facilities down in Virginia that is using PSA, same type of stuff. But I'll explain to you the many advantages to our equipment and why I'm excited in presenting that to you today. HBOT is becoming a big area, especially with veterinarians now. On the also, we have biological and environmental. That would be like ozone generation, our equipment being used with an ozone generator for odor control after a fire in a big facility where they clean out the smell. Well, you use ozone and you need oxygen to make more ozone. You could use ambient air at 21% like we're breathing right now, but it's more effective and efficient to use one of our oxygen generators, is what is called the feed air source or concentrators. We also do quite a bit of business with aquaculture. You can kind of put that under medical in a way, but we sell a lot to aquaculture where we use our systems. I do quite a bit of business in Vancouver, on the east coast of Canada, Norway, Iceland, South America, where there's fish farms. You go to your store and you see, farm-raised, and this is becoming very big, farm-raised salmon. Well, our equipment is used with a lot of the big facilities where we inject oxygen at 93% into the water, whether it's in the Atlantic Ocean or what we call recirculating aquaculture facilities, where they're called indoor facilities, where they basically, start off and eventually farm the salmon to going to marketplace to your store, which takes about 2 to 3 years. But we inject oxygen in the water, the fish grow faster, healthier, and larger. Why? Because the DO level goes up. The fish are very happy, especially during the summer months where the DO level does go down because of the heat, and we do quite a bit of business with that. Then we have another area called thermal, where we do quite a bit of business with, especially overseas, but we do some domestically here, steel making. We do soldering, brazing, welding, light cutting, where oxygen is used with an oxy-fuel torch. An area that we used to do quite a bit of business in, that I had with the other companies, were bead and glass making, kind of a cottage industry where people make jewelry and all that type of stuff. So bottom line, without boring you any further, we're quite diverse with who we sell to, and we're very good at what we do. So that's kind of a background about myself. As I indicated, our equipment will meet 93% USP pharmacopoeia specs, so I want to reassure you that your patients will be receiving medical grade oxygen 24/7. We are also an ISO 9001 organization. I talked a little bit about the military, so that's a little bit about our company, a little bit about my background, and if you have any questions, jump in at any time. All right, let's get to the guts of things here. Why utilize, and what I put together for you, which I think you'll appreciate, I put together some basic material. The larger packet is a little bit about our company, a little bit about the features of the equipment, some things I've touched upon right now. The first couple pages are more specifically about the technology, the system which I have talked to Dr. Kuhlman about to date, called the DOCS or MDOCS 80, which we'll touch upon. And I also gave you a little bit of a floor plan, which A big advantage to our technology is that space requirements is not really that large compared to the other alternative technology, which we'll talk upon in a little bit. But, and you can reference that, and I have some bullet points here, and I may reference some of those. Why utilize a PCI gases oxygen generating system for your practice? I've been very heavily into this trade shows. I go to the Western Veterinary Show, the national ones, VMX down in Florida, which used to be NAVC. I've done them all. I've done ACVIM, the American College of Veterinary Medical Surgeon, AHA, I think they don't have shows anymore. I'm doing an emergency vet show in Washington this year in September, which I'm really looking excited for too, because it's more emergency medicine, larger facilities that really can use our equipment. But I've been involved with this industry for almost 30 years, of course, a little bit over a year with this company. But the big thing, and we touched upon it in Vegas, Doctor, is why have an oxygen generator? You know, why spend the extra money? Number one thing I hear, well, two things. The DVMs I met over the years, and I have hundreds of systems that I have sold over the years and worked with DVMs and practice managers, etc. Fred, I want to become independent. I want to get away from my current oxygen supplier. They're good people, but you know, costs are going up. And I'm getting sick of these 2 or 3 page bills or whatever and all these additional charges, and I'm paying a lot more than I did a year before or a couple years before that. But the big thing is they want to become independent. They want to own something. They want something that's theirs. They want something, which we'll discuss about, that'll last 15 years on average with minimal maintenance. So that's a big thing I hear. Another thing, as I indicated, was their bills keep going up. And it's true. As we talked a little bit in the beginning, oxygen costs, there's major companies, Praxair, who you use, which is now Linde, they were just combined with a big merger here the past couple months. Also, there's Air Products, Air Liquide, smaller companies also. I may be missing a couple too, but there's national companies, and then you have your communities that have small outlets that service you, okay? But they get it from the big boys. And pricing is dictated from the big boys. Pricing, to make a long story short, usually goes up twice a year, and it's not going to come down. So these big, we'll use Praxair Linde for an example. January and July, they increased costs. This past January, I think it was 15 to 20% on the commodity, and that's just not the oxygen, that's all their gases. Hydrogen, helium, nitrogen, it's across the board, and from what I saw, it's about 15% this year. And that's another, I would say number 2, people come up to me during the shows and they say, my costs, I don't know, a lot of the DVMs, if they're owners, etc., and please don't take this the wrong way, they may not know how much you're spending. They have sometimes no clue. And I say, go back to your billing person, go back to accounts payable. And they come back to me and they go, Fred, I just can't believe it. I just can't believe the cost that we are spending. So not to harp upon that, I think I got my point across that costs are a big concern and they'll always increase. But one last thing I'll say about the suppliers, they're good people. You know, they serve a major purpose out there. In a way, I wouldn't be here without them. But they play, and they can play around with the commodity price. It's quoted in per 100 cubic feet of oxygen that's sold to you and what you use in the door and how it's exchanged and how they bill it. And we won't get into the other surcharges, delivery, this and that. But the commodity price, they can manipulate. And from what I've seen, contracts that used to be in place 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, a lot of these contracts are going away because they're not standing for it with their oxygen suppliers. So these companies, Praxair, are getting away, I don't want to say entirely, but maybe for a facility like you, if you went to them, they don't want to lose your business. If they don't, they may deal away with that contract. But you know what? That makes my story here even more compelling and exciting to talk about our equipment. So those are some of the things. And another thing too, and this may hit home. I've had people come up to me at shows and say, you know, Fred, I spoke with a DVM in Vegas, the last vet show I did. They said, We have some great people at our facility, but I had a gal who left on the cylinder overnight, and the cylinder drained. Came in Monday morning, ready to do surgeries, and we had no oxygen. Nothing. We had people walking through the door at 8 or 9 o'clock. We had surgeries going on. So what did they do? They got oxygen. And their supplier was very happy to take the call. You know why? He spent $400 on an emergency delivery. That was literally 2 blocks down the street. This was in the state of, I believe, Washington, who I spoke with a DVM, and he said, I go, $400 for an emergency call? Yeah, they were happy to bring it, but $400, you won't have to worry about that with a PCI oxygen generator or concentrator. So, I think those may hit home a little bit more. Looking back at the beginning of oxygen concentrators in the market, we'll just touch upon this a little bit. Back in the 1970s, they started off basically in the home health care industry. People with home health care companies, mom and pop companies that supplied oxygen to patients coming out of hospitals. Basically, heart failure, lung disease, emphysema, bronchitis, black lung disease, etc. And these companies in the 70s had small, and you may have seen them, 10-liter per minute units, and they're still available now, and veterinarians do use them, believe it or not. And there's a place for them, which we'll discuss. But you gotta be careful. You have to be careful with them. Those small 10-liter per minute units, or may I say 3 or 5 liter per minute units, came out in the 70s. And they started serving the purpose very, very well. Home healthcare suppliers were doing very, very well at the time with their revenue. But then the 80s came around, and back in the mid-80s when I got involved, which I'm dating myself here, there was called the 6-point plan, where basically Medicare put their foot down and said, we're reimbursing you too much. So liquid, high-pressure cylinders, and oxygen concentrators had what is called a modality-neutral reimbursement rate. And that became very, very concerning to home health care companies. And patients coming out where respiratory therapists would go out, set up the equipment, and they were billed as long as their equipment, through private insurance, Medicaid, Medicare, the home health care supplier would bill the appropriate companies. But then that came out in the 80s where they changed the reimbursement rate, and cylinders and liquid became a lot more expensive to do. Kind of like what you're going through, delivery charges, commodity charges, people delivering it, their staff. So concentrators started becoming more and more of an acceptance in the mid-80s, and even to this date with home health care, they're still used quite a bit for people that need supplemental oxygen in the home. But a lot has changed, especially costs. The big thing is that cylinders and liquid are expensive. And are you leasing them most likely, or do you own them? You may own them or lease the equipment. That adds cost on. But that's kind of a quick background. It started off in the home health care industry, and there's been a lot of changes, and it's come down to cost, of course. And that's why oxygen concentrators or generators are becoming, well, as we've talked about, I'd say the past 5 or 6 years in the veterinary medical market, I've been selling equipment to facilities, and it's worked out very, very well. So that's a little bit about the beginning of the market. I won't touch upon that very much, but they've been around since the 70s. How do oxygen concentrators work? You folks may know the basic principles from maybe reading some stuff or talking with other people. It comes down to this stuff right here. This is the technology. This is the brains, and I'll pass it around. You could even open it up and put it in your hand if you want. Just don't put water on it because it'll burn you. It will. That is called molecular sieve, synthetic zeolite. That is the brains of our technology, and that's been around since like the 60s from Union Carbide, Linde. Kind of a spin-off of course, Linde, who just purchased Praxair with the acquisition. And it started up in my area of town, up in Buffalo, New York, where I live. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention, although it's irrelevant, our facilities in California, in Riverside, I work remotely and live out of Buffalo, New York. If not, I would have a wife, and I'd be maybe working a couple jobs to pay the bills. But no, we have all our family up there, and it's a nice area, kind of like down here too. You know, nice area to raise a family. So with that said, that synthetic zeolite is the brains of any oxygen concentrator in the marketplace. Without that, you wouldn't have the technology. What it does is that, and on one of your handouts, which we'll eventually get into, where it talks about VSA and PSA technology, this one right here, that will discuss it a little bit more, and it discusses it in your larger packet. But to kind of condense down what that is, this stuff, the air we breathe is 21% oxygen, 78% nitrogen, 1% argon, in that range. When you have an electromechanical device as a concentrator / generator, so you have one in your facility right now, it uses ambient air. That is the lifeblood that we require. So it requires ambient air that we're breathing right now at that mixture of gases percentage. Goes through some valves. We won't get too specific right now. We will in a moment, because I want to talk to you about the differences in technology and why VSA is much more, I feel, advantageous, cost-wise, etc., for your facility and any facility based upon their need compared to the other technologies. So ambient air will eventually go through our system and eventually come to this material. And you'll see on the right-hand side the absorber vessel. It's packed with this material. This attracts nitrogen like a sponge and allows the oxygen to pass through as a product gas. Ultimately, through a little buffer tank, which we all have in our technologies, what is called a small oxygen storage tank, directly to your manifold, through your lines, at upwards of 93%, 95%, medical grade oxygen, 24/7. I want to state that as long as you have power and you have a generator here, a backup generator, which is outstanding. We've talked about a backup, either liquid or cylinders. You're perfect. And that's what you need in case of a power outage, because this is electromechanical. You need to have a backup supply of oxygen available at all times. But getting back to this attracts nitrogen like a sponge, allows the oxygen to pass through as a product gas, and it goes through a process, in our case, about every 40 seconds, where eventually in the cycling, some oxygen and air in the lines, without getting too technical, will reverse. That's why we use a reversible blower and purge the nitrogen off of the sieve. It's like blow it right off within the vessel, back to ambient. So it'll go outside and go back into the room, or in some cases, if need be, depending upon the room size, it can be vented out to the outside if it's an area where we don't have a lot of room. So this will operate 24/7, and this will last, I want to say indefinitely, at least 10 years, if not more. It should not go after a couple years like I've gone through in the past, which we won't get into. Those are more technical issues. But that's a very simple explanation of what is called PSA, pressure swing absorption. It's been around for many, many years. It's a very, very reliable technology, and you shouldn't have to replace this. And as long as you have an air compressor or something to that extent, some valves, an absorber vessel, as you can see on the sheet, an oxygen storage tank, you'll always have oxygen to your facility 24/7. So that's a little bit about how oxygen concentrators work and operate. Any specific questions? Okay, very good. Moving right along, how do you choose a right oxygen concentrator for your facility? And this is something I could say, and I'm not trying to be arrogant or upfront. I'm very passionate about what I do, as I think you could tell. And that helps me quite a bit when I'm marketing our products over the past 30 years. The veterinary, I have an article coming out that I wrote about a lot what we're talking about in Veterinary Product News magazine in the next month or two. And I wanted to do it because I wanted to educate folks like you who may know some stuff about the technology, but not a lot of the variables involved that you may not hear because they don't want to tell you. And I don't mean negative, it's just that when I go to trade shows, I'm the only manufacturer there. And I'm not saying that's good or bad, but there's resellers, there's representatives, there's distributors, and they're good people. They're good people, and they want to help, and they want to help you. If you need a small unit, because most of the time you see the small units, but after that, they know nothing. And when people have a problem, because they're electromechanical, the one thing that bothers me that I'm very passionate about is educating people and having a company that can support you, as I indicated in my introductory message. Having someone that could be there for you 24/7 or get you a spare part and not have to worry about weeks and weeks to getting you a filter because they have to go through, you know what I'm saying, a manufacturer, another source. Oops, excuse me. With that said, choosing the right action concentrator. I'm getting too passionate about what I do here. So as Dr. Kuhlman and I, when we met in Vegas, you want to be very precise with people you're speaking with at shows. If you're meeting, even if you run into them at like a restaurant and a physician that I know and they start talking about concentrators or generators. There's various questions. I'm very precise, and that's why the analysis and the report that you receive is spot on from the standpoint of ultimately it's up to the facility to bless what I analyze, meaning what the liter per minute requirement and my recommendation for equipment is. It's ultimately up to them. I can't bless that because there may be things that they may want to add on another cage, some more anesthetic equipment, a Snyder cage, which takes up quite a bit of oxygen that I'm not aware of. But I do a guideline and I'm very, very thorough. So to jump into that, bullet points on how we size it and what we've done for your facility to date. We want to find out the oxygen flow rate. That's the key. So number one, I ask, how many anesthetic machines do you currently utilize? In your case, around 6 or 7. I usually I allocate about 1 to 2 liters per minute on average for each anesthetic machine. I use the upper end. You're not going to go wrong with using 2 to 1 liters per minute. So that is one thing I check off. Number 2, although they're not used maybe as much anymore, are anesthetic ventilators or ventilators on their own. If you're using a ventilator, you require 50 psi, no questions asked, through your lines. You're not going to get away with 20 psi from a small oxygen concentrator. So if they're using a ventilator, either attached to the anesthetic machine or on their own, it's based upon tidal volume, but usually it's 4 liters per minute in that area, but more importantly per machine, and about 50 psi through the lines. No ifs, ands, or buts. That's category 2. Number 3, intensive care units, ICU recovery cages. That's going to be the biggest, may I say, oxygen use that you're going to have. The Snyder cage you have downstairs, which we looked at, good sized cage, Snyder, Shoreline, good companies. And I work with them quite closely in our projects. I've heard all sorts of stories. A lot of DVMs come up to me and they go, a lot of them don't know how much oxygen they're using. Please don't take that the wrong way. You've got other things to worry about. But some of them say, well, I've been told there's a flow meter on the side indicating